Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. It's Monday, the 22nd of August, 2022. Time for the ye old hurricane outlook and discussion. Good to have you with me. Lots of potential out there, but the big question is, does it live up and amount to something? We will see as we unpack everything and look ahead to what's happening or what's not happening, and maybe everything in between. I'll do my best, all right? Good to have you with me this afternoon. Let's see where we are. Well, we'll start with our good friends at the National Hurricane Center and what they are looking at. This is Invest Area 90L. We have gone 90 through 99 already. Now we are back to 90L. The L, of course, is for Atlantic there. And this is it, 10% chance over the next 48 hours, 30% chance going out to 5 days. We'll see about that. Interesting there. In the Eastern Pacific, like I said in my morning update, hardly even worth mentioning this, only a 40% chance of development. It's in an area of a pretty stable environment overall, kind of far north in latitude, but it's on the map, so I thought I'd bring it up. No concern to land at all. All right, satellite animation. Let me start here over land just for a minute. This, my friends, was very well advertised. I talked about that last week. The quantitative precipitation forecast was painting at least 10 inches for that area, and that is exactly what has happened. So kudos to the Weather Prediction Center and all of the modeling and everything that goes into that. Pretty excessive rainfall, tropical moisture, those high precipitable water values that I was showing you last week. All of that was there. The impulse came in, a little area of vorticity to set it all off, so to speak. And bam, we have had quite a day there in parts of eastern and northeast central Texas. More rain than I think we could use right now. If it could kind of spread it out over a longer period of time, that would be great. But my friend Bill Reed, former director of the National Hurricane Center, as he often has said, and those of you that know him, you've probably heard him say this, especially for Texas, that all droughts end with flood. There's usually very little in between, unfortunately. All right, so what about the tropics? Well, a little bit of shower and thunderstorm activity starting to perk up in more areas as the Madden-Julian oscillation comes in and becomes more established. It's still a process. I'll show you that in just a few minutes. This, though, this outline right through here, and then the upper level low with it, that's the TUT, the tropical upper tropospheric trough sitting in there. Another upper level low sitting over here. Just this whole system of upper level convergence and strong southwesterly winds that are kind of cutting through this way. That is not very favorable. But out here in the open Atlantic, a much more favorable upper level environment. However, and there's always a however, especially this year, the mid-level dry air still seems to be an issue. The stability of the atmosphere, there's just not a lot of unstable air out there. And a lot of people are starting to wonder why. Where'd that come from? How come that wasn't picked up in the seasonal forecasts? Need I remind you that back in early June, it's not that long ago, the Euro, the ECMWF seasonal guidance was suggesting a mega season, 225 ace. Maybe it will just be in the 20s after all, but minus the 200 part. Freudian slip there, right? But it is really curious as to what is keeping things from taking off. And, it's in the Western Pacific as well, even though we do have some activity out there. And we've had a busy Eastern Pacific. The Atlantic still seems to be in this funk, and a lot of people are trying to figure it out. We don't have time to go into all that today, but it's kind of still there, certainly, but there is more convection. And so my theory of maybe we're just delaying things, I'm still going to hold with that until I can't. Maybe it's going to be a very busy September and October, and during that 8-week time frame, we have a very big season. 1988 was big, late start. 98 was a late start. 61. There are others. We'll see. We'll see. All right. One of the things that is definitely in favor of things being active, and I showed you this over and over and over, would be the sea surface temperature anomalies. Positive here in the Atlantic in terms of favorability. Positive in terms of favorability for the Pacific. We've got the La Nina out here, so you put a check mark. These are all favorable. Not so sure what this is doing to kind of throw a monkey wrench into things. It's into subtropics. Maybe some drier air is getting advected or moved horizontally. Convection is the vertical motion of air, advection with an AD. is the lateral or horizontal movement of air. So maybe that air through a big old subtropical high is getting pushed down into the tropics here, and that's flooding the area with more stable air. I don't know, a lot of theories about it, but generally, I mean, look at it. The anomalies are above the long-term average, and if anything does get going and makes it over to where these land masses are, there could be trouble. That's what I'm saying from the graphic, the headline graphic over here. Lots of potential, that is for sure. All right, so actual sea surface temperatures, and if you're wondering, 26 Celsius, where are you? Sometimes it's hard to find. I think it's the yellow one right now. They changed the scale from time to time. So there's 26 Celsius. I'll outline it. Can't even talk today. Outline it in white. So it made it pretty far to the north recently, but it's retreated a little bit. So you folks in Long Island and elsewhere, the Jersey Shore, sorry, it didn't get that warm this year. Even though, if we go back to the anomaly map, this is so interesting. The water temperatures are cool up there, but look, they are warmer than average in that area. That just baffles me. Like several degrees warmer than average, and yet they're still too cool, at least for my taste. Anyhow, down south, warmer as you would expect, 26, 27. Now the 26 areas are just right up against the coast. We've had some consistent and persistent disturbed weather, lots of shower and thunderstorm activity. Northwest flow last week, southwesterly flow this week. So the coastal area is right against the shelf, cooling off a little bit, but just offshore, make no mistake, very warm, 28, 29 Celsius, and even that little tongue of 30 Celsius sticking its way in there east of Florida and Georgia. What about the Gulf? Still very, very toasty, 31 Celsius up against the peninsula of Florida, down here south of Cuba near the Isle of Youth there. That right there is from strong south flow, comes across, you get upwelling of colder water, a very classic signature there, so that's not a surprise. But everything else, all through here, around 30 degrees Celsius, only a few pockets of cooler temperatures, so the Gulf very much primed for activity should something come through there. At least for now, it has been nice and quiet. And the vorticity signature, I mean, look at that. Let's use white again. It'll show up better. Nothing at all in the Gulf of Mexico. No energy down there. Vorticity, as we call it, storminess. There certainly is right there, sitting over eastern Texas, and that was, like I said, well forecast by the global models and the regional models, the WPC. I think that's pretty remarkable. We're looking at the hurricane season out here going, well, what happened? But then this, forecast just a few days ago, maybe that's what it comes down to. Forget looking out 2 weeks or 2 months ahead. You just need 5 days. And really, that's pretty much the limitation of most global models anyway. But I digress. That's an interesting signature there. That's that energy, that vorticity in the atmosphere, the match that set the fire, so to speak, even though it's a lot of heavy rain. You get the analogy. That's what did it. It pulled in all that tropical moisture. The overall pattern did, and this has wrung it out with that very heavy rain over eastern Texas. There's some energy out in the eastern tropical Atlantic, but look, it's elongated. This is a lot more bundled than this, that's for sure, and just a very weak signature here in the eastern Pacific. So we'll move on, and let's go over to our friends, the MJO plots. All right. A lot of talk about the pattern flipping, the signal changing, so forth and so on. We are just now seeing the Madden-Julian oscillation way up at 200 millibars, that tropical forcing that we talk about, where you basically give it that big umbrella of protection so that deep thunderstorms can develop and go vertical and not be sheared apart. And there's more complex parts to it than that, but that's the simplistic way to describe it. It is a period of favorability, and we can look here, we'll get rid of me just to focus on this, is beginning to show up. Let's use blue to highlight it. We're right here. So it's just coming out of the null phase. This is the GEFS, so the GFS Ensemble Forecast System. There's the mean, the average, right? Over the next few days, it comes out, and then it de-amplifies pretty quickly there. Only a few days of favorability in the ensemble mean, and then you got all sorts of craziness with the different members of the ensemble itself. All right, so that's the GFS. Here's the ECMWF. It's got an even shorter lifespan, if you will, of the MJO being favorable, and its ensemble members have some different solutions, of course, as well. And then the JMA, way more enthusiastic, if you will. Quite the amplitude here, rapidly going out into phases 1 and 2, which are very favorable for the Western Hemisphere and Africa, the Indian Ocean region. I'm going to show you this on a map in just a moment. And its ensembles are much more tightly packed. So we'll see. If you blend them all together, it does suggest that we are entering right now, this week, a more favorable period for upward motion across the Atlantic. Get my chair adjusted here. So will the Atlantic react? That's what we're going to try to figure out together, all right? One more map to show you, then we're going to look at some of the guidance. Now, if you take all of that and you put it on a Mercator projection map, that's what it looks like. All that green in there, that is your upward motion in the atmosphere favoring with the gradient that you can see here, even more so right where we would expect it. I mean, that's about as favorable a look as you can get. This ends, the forecast period is from today, the 22nd, ending 5 days out on the 27th. I mean, that's it. You know, sinking in the Pacific, rising in the Atlantic, we should start to see stuff happening. If it doesn't, then something is wrong, period. And that's going to be a very simplistic way to say it, but that's it. Something will be wrong. We get through this 5 to 7 days and nothing develops out in the Atlantic basin, then something is amiss. So let's look at the ECMWF. That's the Euro, as we call it for short. 12Z run from today, 5,000 foot level of the atmosphere. This is valid this afternoon, so just a few hours out from its initialization. Little impulse there. There's all that stuff that's causing the trouble in northeast Texas. And this is interesting. Look at how these wind barbs are through here. Just this large gyre. Instead of these little concentrated areas, everything's just very large. And this is not the Western Pacific. In the Western Pacific, you have these giant monsoon troughs. These huge areas, like a gyre almost, of winds that come around in sort of a counterclockwise fashion that is a big focusing mechanism across that vast area of very warm water in the Westpac all the way out to the Philippine Sea. And you get these typhoons that develop off of that. Rarely are they from tropical waves that come off Africa that happen to make it all the way over to the Western Pacific. It's that monsoon trough, and the Pacific's big enough that these areas can kind of pinch off, and they've got days and days and days to consolidate, and you get these big West Pacific typhoons. The Atlantic doesn't have that luxury, so to speak. So when I look out here and I see these westerly winds coming in here, and they curve around, now they're coming in from the east over here, and you just have this big trough right through here, this monsoon trough. It's so large that these impulses coming off, if they are also large, they just don't have time to bundle up. They're just too big for their own good. So if that changes and we see more concentrated impulses come off, then the overall background state could be one that sets these systems off. And that's why I'm thinking that maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of a delay this year, a couple weeks, and that once we get into September, through a good deal of October, there could be a 6 to 8 week period where things get very, very busy. That is a valid possibility. Only one way to find out if I'm right about that theory, and that is to wait and see. We don't know. Now, we can look through the model here and, and see if it is showing us, if I can get it to work, anything interesting over the next few days. Come on, work with me here. And, you know, this is what, every 3 hours or so? Not much. We're out at 72. There's 96. That's 4 days. 4 days out. 5 days out. Look, it's all pretty much the same. 5 days out. There's these large pockets of energy. This one's a little bit more concentrated, but, I mean, it's barely there. Not much at all across the Caribbean. Some talk. I saw Philippe Papin talking about this, at a cold surge coming from the southern hemisphere up the Amazon that could create basically some resistance down here that would force more vorticity or spin that could try to generate something down near Trinidad and Tobago that could head into the Caribbean. That's getting very complex, and it's a rare situation, but modeling is kind of, some of the models see it, some don't. Just something to watch, though. There's a lot of different ways to get genesis of storm events. By the way, you can pop some vorticity off of Colombia over here that sometimes gets wrapped up into the monsoon trough or the gyre in the East Pac and the Western Caribbean. You throw a little piece of energy off of these mountains down here of Colombia, and you get some storms to develop and head up into the Caribbean and the Gulf, usually in October. Anyway, a lot of stuff to watch. That's what I was saying. There's a lot of potential. That's 5 days out. We just might as well look at it a week. There's 6 days right there. And then finally at day 7, 1 week out, not much. A little bit of a reflectivity there. Another large system there. That's a little bit more what I'm talking about. That little feature right there. A little bit more concentrated, coming off at a little bit of a lower latitude there. It's not way up here. There's the Cabo Verde Islands, right? The Cape Verde Islands. There's Cape Verde itself. So that is still August 29th. It's not quite September. Plenty of time left on the clock. We will see. And by this time, of course, the Madden-Julian oscillation should be in place to give these systems something to develop into with a pretty favorable upward motion pattern out there. So we'll see about that. That's the pattern. That's it. That's the next week or so. And, and I just wanted to point out one more thing here. Yes, so we're about right here, roughly, on the climatological chart. That's around August 22nd or so, maybe a little bit higher up. But in reality, we're still down here. Isn't that funny how that works? This is where we should be, climatologically speaking, but we're still flatlined in reality. So we'll see. Does this start to catch up? I mean, there's a lot riding on this. I was just thinking about it. All of these seasonal forecasts, from NOAA to private agencies, universities, going real big early on, April, May, June, July, even in the early part of August, very big hurricane season still forecast. If this turns out to be one of the slowest hurricane seasons of modern history, now, there's still a lot of time to go, believe me. I don't want to start, you can hype the wrong way if you're not careful. There's hype like, oh man, the world's coming to an end, there's all these hurricanes coming. But you can also downplay something when you know good and well we don't know the outcome yet, right? And we don't. It's only August 22nd. And I think we've been kind of lured into believing these last couple of years, it should just be hyperactive all the time, when in fact, maybe this is a return more to a normal busy time period with just a little bit of a slower start. I don't know. We'll figure it out together, but that's interesting where we should be versus where we are in reality. Certainly a pretty big discrepancy, obviously. All right? All right. That is it from me for today. Don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Always good information here for you. I try my best. Point you in the right direction at least. So like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff to help us grow. I do appreciate it. I appreciate the back-end team as well, putting this together for me. Kari made the thumbnail. And just real quick, by the way, last night, speaking of our back-end team, I went up to Raleigh and met with our programmer, one of our programmers, and we've got this wind data interface that when we do get a hurricane, and there will eventually be one, our ability to transmit live wind data is exceptional now. We still have the same anemometers, the Arm Youngs, but the interface, the display of it is absolutely remarkable. We're going to have instant wind readings, so it's going to be every second live, a 1 minute average, a 5 minute average, and a 10-minute average with, of course, the peak gust for that minute along with real-time 1 minute updating air pressure from 4 separate high-end Arm Young based and then Kestrel, these guys. Right there, those little Kestrels for the other. The Arm Young makes the best wind sensors, in my opinion, and the Kestrels there do very, very good for air pressure, and they're relatively cheap, $130 or so a pop, so we can have a lot of them out there. But a lot of stuff, a lot of potential here, not just from the tropics, but our ability to cover what happens from the tropics should something like yesterday or last night's ensemble shot there come to fruition, where something does impact. We will certainly be ready more than we've ever been. All right? All right, let me get out of here and post this for you. As always, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back tomorrow morning with What's Up in the Tropics. Until then, have a great rest of your Monday. I'll talk at you again tomorrow morning.